Beautiful, beautiful. Thank you, Shivanya. I believe. Our Spirit Groups book author, Mirabai Starr, said, living as a mystic means orienting the whole of yourself towards the sacred. It's a matter of purposely looking through the lens of love. I'm going to say that again. Living as a mystic means orienting the whole of yourself towards the sacred. It's a matter of purposely looking through the lens of love. Well, our author studied, translated, and lived with mystics. So she certainly has walked that spiritual path herself, and she says that becoming a mystic is showing up for and being present to all that is, exactly as it is. And she says to us, you are a mystic. We are all mystics. So we're beginning week 2 of our Spirit Groups 5 weeks program, and this coming week we're focusing on chapter 2 and chapter 3. And the invitation of those chapters is to practice showing up for the experience of the present moment and to live life in radical amazement. Well, this is not new. Spiritual teachings for eons have been giving us that message. Living in the now. I even got out Eckhart Tolle's book, the Now. And it was back in 1999 it came out, and it was revolutionary then. And now it seems like we all know that, right? We're living in the now. But just because we know it doesn't necessarily mean that we have the tools to experience it or a way to practice that every day. So as I was getting ready for this talk, I thought, well, I wondered, how do I live in the awareness of this moment as the mystics do, and how might I convey that in a talk? And so as my processes, I began to do some journaling, some reflective journaling, and, asking the questions about the now and arriving in the now moment. And actually, the truth is we're already here in the now, but in our minds we think we have to arrive. But the message that I got was stop, look, listen, God speaking. And I thought, oh boy, what does that mean? And why would I want to know about that? And if I do want to know about it, how can I practice that in my life? So in looking at that message, the first thing about God speaking is we know in unity our first principle is God is absolute good and everywhere present. And so you might say that God is love. So love is listening. You might say God is spirit. So spirit is listening. You might say God is wisdom, divine wisdom. So divine wisdom is listening. So whatever you're comfortable with in terms of your connection with God and spirit and the divine, I don't think the words matter. I think it's what's in your heart and how you connect with spirit, God, your creator, all that is. In our daily life, our busyness can keep us from experiencing the present moment. And so in order to do that, we have to stop. And so there's stopping the physical, which, yeah, okay, I've stopped. But what about what's going on in my mind? What about my thoughts and feelings? And how can I stop those from interrupting my experience of the present moment? We, in Unity, good news, we have denials and affirmations, and so we can use that tool. We can deny that those thoughts and feelings have any power over us, and we can affirm in its place a spiritual truth, whether God is love, God is everywhere present, whatever spiritual truth speaks to you is it just feels right to you in that moment. And once we've stopped, even if it's only for a moment, even a little flash, we do have the opportunity to look around us. And as we look and see, we can see the beauty of creation. We can see in the smile, we can see in the people that we're with, that love and that presence. And also hear the message that we are to hear. Unity co-founder Charles Fillmore, who, by the way, many people thought was a mystic, and I'm of that persuasion as well. He defined in the revealing word stillness as a mental state of infinite peace, rest, and tranquility, where our senses are hushed and we abide in God. In that same section, he quotes the psalmist in Psalm 46, "Be still and know that I am God." And he goes on and defines that still small voice as the voice of spirit speaking within the depths of one's being. It's not an audible voice. It comes from within as a spiritual knowing. Well, have you ever had that experience where you've gotten quiet and there's that inner knowing, that inner guidance of what's the next right thing for you to do or think or experience? I know I've had that. And sometimes the biggest challenge is to listen to the guidance. Maybe you've had that experience as well. I think I know better, right? So I go off and I'll do something. And that's where life's lessons come in. Oh, I get it. Guidance is to be listened to. So back on the path, and off we go. And that's our spiritual classroom that we're in, to connect with our divine self and experience life in its fullest in that way. Our author describes a 17th century monk, Brother Lawrence, and Reverend Juan spoke of him last Sunday. And she says of Brother Lawrence, he turned to love in the midst of everyday life and centered himself there while he was peeling potatoes and washing dishes in the kitchen, neither of which he enjoyed doing. But he used that experience and that time to connect with God. And what he said was, the presence of God is our spirit in contact with God. It's a realization that God is present, and it is made known to us either by imagination or understanding. So he spoke words of truth to himself while he was doing his mundane tasks. So in our Unity on the Bay app, we have a SpiritGroups guide for this coming week. And one of the affirmations in that guide I'd like to share with you, it says, I see and feel God's love everywhere. And I invite you to repeat that with me now. I see and feel God's love everywhere. Yes. So why might we want to develop a practice where we stop, look, and listen to the voice for God? Well, there was a time in my life where I was a student of the Buddhist monk Thich Nhat Hanh. And one of the things that he said really had an impact on me. He said, "You have an appointment with life, and that appointment is in the present moment. If you miss the present moment, you miss your appointment with life." Our life happens in the present moment, in this now moment. If our minds are preoccupied with the past or worried about the future, we can miss our whole life. And I think of that often when I am preoccupied and I say, wait a minute, I don't want to miss my life. Let me come back to the present moment to experience the love and peace of God. You know, I love being a grandparent. I don't know how many of you out here are grandparents or know of grandparents or have little people in your life. But there's nothing more enjoyable than watching a small child be in the present moment, and you get to experience that love and joy. And I've noticed as well that grandfathers get as much joy as grandmothers. You know, as parents, we're very busy with our career and disciplining. You know, we want the children to behave, and sometimes we miss out on those moments. But we get a redo as grandparents. And if you haven't had a child or if you haven't had grandchildren, there are many opportunities to observe children. You know, sometimes, and it's a true confession, sometimes on YouTube, I'll watch those. You ever see those little baby videos, how they giggle or they do stuff? It's just so cute and so funny. And if you're not into babies, you can look at the puppy videos. You know how the puppies wag their tails and do that stuff. Or the kittens, how they play and purr and stuff. So there are many, many opportunities to experience joy and laughter in the moment. Our author puts it this way. She says, to live as an ordinary mystic means embracing all areas of life as doorways to the sacred. So I underlined all for me because all means all. And that sometimes is hard because while we're going through some difficult times, it's hard to be with them. And yet, that's our spiritual calling and our spiritual practice. And I can say, looking back on my life, that some of the worst times in my life, when I look back and say, boy, that was really a good thing that it happened in that way. And so yes, being grateful in all things. So I have another question for you. Have you ever gone for a walk in the woods or spent time in the forest and experienced the trees and nature and things? Yeah. I think most of us know what a tree is, right? No. And so I have a funny story to tell you about that. A mystic was walking mindfully in the woods, and he came upon a magnificent oak tree. And he gave the tree a hug. And the tree said to the mystic, "Leave your worries behind and branch out into the present." Okay. So remember, if you're laughing, you're in the present moment. So how do we stop so that we can truly look and listen and see what's before us and create a space so that we can hear that message that Spirit has for us? And I think first we have to decide that this is really what we want. And that's where our spiritual power of will comes in. Our ability to choose, decide, and determine what will come to pass in our experience. And I am certain that there have been many times in your life where you have used that power of will to accomplish things that you thought were almost impossible, but through that determination and decision, you were able to do that. And so I think part of the practice is to put the excuses aside and make a conscious decision that we're going to honor a certain part, that spiritual part in our lives. And some of these practices I'm sure you're familiar with. We say this almost every week: prayer and meditation, walking meditation, spending time in nature, hugging a tree. And there's one practice that I'll highlight for you here, and it's called grounding. And if you've never done that or heard of it, I can describe it for a little bit. You take your shoes off and you stand barefoot on the ground, whether it's the lawn or the beach or somewhere, and you feel that energy of the earth, and you become grounded in yourself, and you stand there. It's a beautiful practice. And last week in the Spirit Groups, one of the participants said, well, I set a reminder on my phone for 10 o'clock and 2 o'clock and 4 o'clock so that I remember to do my practice. And that could be a good thing to do as well. We all have these devices. But it works for whatever practice that you choose. And so I thought we'd practice a little bit here now. Take a moment to focus on the flower. What is its message for you? Just look at it, breathe in, and see the beauty. See the flower. Can you see its perfection? Each petal, the symmetry, the design, it's beautiful. Can you see God in the flower? Once we've stopped, we can appreciate what is here, right now, right where we are. We can begin to see God in everything. And this is a practice that I've also adopted. It's from a lesson in the Course in Miracles. It says, God is in everything I see because God is in my mind. And in developing this practice of contemplation, we're moving into another area of spirituality. Think about Brother Lawrence. Our author describes what she has done for herself in terms of practice, and she made time for stillness by practicing the Jewish tradition of Sabbath. And I don't know if any of you have been in a Jewish household on a Sabbath, on a Shabbat, on a Friday night, where things get quiet, a candle gets lit, and prayers are said to welcome in the Sabbath, that time of quiet and reflection. And I had the book ahead of time, so I thought I would try it. And what for me the Sabbath meant was fasting from technology, experiencing a time when I didn't have my watch on that reminded me to stand, told me when I had exercised, told me what text. I took it off. I put the phone on vibrate, put that off to the side, and I didn't look at my email. And I went through the day on its own schedule, on its own time, without any appointments, without any need to rush, without any need to hurry. It was a beautiful experience. And I plan on continuing that. And the invitation for you is maybe to, even if you can't take a day, see if you can plan a couple of hours, set aside, or you can even write an appointment for yourself in your thing. I wrote, actually, it's so funny, I wrote in big letters. I have a paper calendar. They all make fun of me. But I wrote in big letters on my calendar, retreat. And it was really a wonderful experience. Spiritual teacher David Hawkins says, just being ordinary itself is an expression of divinity. The truth of one's real self can be discovered through the pathway of everyday life. He goes on to say, to live with care and kindness is all that is necessary. To live with care and kindness is all that is necessary. The rest reveals itself in due time. The commonplace and God are not distinct. So we can see that it is through our intention to pay attention, to stop, look, and listen, that we are able to walk the path of the mystic, and in that way arrive at this now moment. Mirabai says, one of the things it means to be an ordinary mystic is to bow at the feet of your everyday existence, with its disappointments, its dramas, its peaceful mornings, and its luminous nights, and to honor yourself just as you are. The invitation for all of us is to live into the mystic that we already are. Namaste.